All right, we'll call to order the work session of the Village Council on February 11th, 2025. Topic of general business. First item is to discuss draft financial policies. Dana, go right ahead.
Yeah, so this evening I have two policies that I've been working on to discuss with you. I've been working through the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, best practices for financial policies to make sure that the village has the ones that we think would be relevant and applicable to us and important for us to have. These are two that we don't have it as a formal council adopted policy. We are doing all the things that are in these policies. They are in our strategic operating plan budget book in the financial policies section, but we call them guidelines because there is not a formally adopted policy. And also a lot of our accounting policies to some degree are in the footnotes and things that are in the audited financial statements report. So it's not that it's anything new that we aren't doing. We're not implementing new processes because of these policies if they were adopted, but it's really just formalizing and having a higher level of adoption and support for these policies. So we'll scroll down here. There we go. So first is the out of the group of the GFOA best practices, there's multiple kind of categories that they cover. I did not feel it was necessary to have a separate policy for all of these different items that somewhat relate to budget or financial planning, so I grouped those together into one policy, and then anything related to accounting and financial reporting is in that one.
Dana, just one quick question. Do we not currently have such a policy? So this is the first time we are seeing this, which is why we don't have a red line. This would all be red.
Correct. So yes, there's no council adopted. All financial policies, aside from 2 or 3 select few, I think the P-card policy, the travel policy, and maybe one other, all financial policies have to be adopted by the council. And these have never existed at that level before. As I said, there's guidelines that are documented every year in the SOP budget book.
And the primary reason for this is to establish this document in line with GFOA recommendations and best practices.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And to, again, give it I guess more of the force of it being a council adopted policy as opposed to just guidelines that management essentially would kind of be the one driving. Not that we haven't been changing anything over the years really, and council is involved in the budget and financial planning process and would be aware of anything that may be outside of the norm of what we do, but this just formalizes that and gets that council level approval of these policies.
And reading through this, I mean, this looks exactly what I've been watching the council do or the village do for the last 15 years. Maybe what am I missing here?
It is just putting it into one formal document. You are absolutely correct. It was not difficult to draft these because it was already somewhere. It was a matter of synthesizing it together in a policy, Pinehurst policy format.
Right.
And maybe throwing in a little more of, general statute references or something like that where applicable. So given that, there's nothing really new that is being proposed in these policies, I can go through them kind of page by page, but if you have read them, maybe better to just focus on if there's any questions or comments that you have.
Semi-quickly.
Okay.
I didn't have too many.
You want to go through page by page?
No.
That what I understood. I read through it. I've got no problem with it.
There's only 8 pages. I just wanted to go through it quickly, as I said.
Okay.
Okay. so for the budget and financial planning policy, the purpose is really just to provide the framework for the development and adoption of the village's budget and long-term financial plans, making sure that we're adhering to the general statutes, outlining key principles, which again, they're all things that we are focusing on through our budget development process already: fiscal responsibility and stability, transparency and accountability, long-term financial planning, and strategic alignment. And giving some broad guidelines for revenues and expenditures, you know, acknowledging that there are options and trade-offs when we are making decisions about how something should be funded in terms of the revenue source.
Go back for a minute. What is that's what I was interested in. The perceived fairness of the revenue source. Describe that more for me.
Let's see, where is that?
Efficiency, equity,
okay.
adequacy, and feasibility. The perceived fairness of the revenue source.
So in terms of equity, yes. So this is usually, again, it says evaluated using an ability to pay, principal, and benefit. So when you have options of like fees and charges would be an example of where we could fund parks and recreation programs through tax dollars, but it's more equitable to fund them through a fee.
User fee.
User fees, correct, where you know, the person who's using it should be the one who's paying for it, because not every citizen may benefit equally from that service being provided.
Right.
So some may perceive it to be unfair if everyone is taxed equally for something that they may not equally use.
I hate to do this.
That's what we're here for. We're here for feedback.
Under efficiency, I would take the word optimally out,
Okay.
because who's to say what is actually optimal? And the rest of the statement, I think, stands on itself. We should seek to minimize waste and inefficiency, but there's no particular decision that even the five of us might agree is optimal. What's the standard that you would judge that against?
Okay.
Yep, and these, I did not come up with these. These are from the School of Government, from a course that they, like an introduction to budget type of course that they offer. So let me make that note.
A lot of things I think you can optimize. I'm not sure our decision-making process is one of them.
Okay. Then expenditures, discussing the key items that are included in our budgeting of expenditures, to some extent getting down to, you know, to what level are we budgeting for expenditures, allowing for contingency, and some discussion of the CIP, and referencing the capital asset policy in terms of that is the guiding document for what's considered capital for the purposes of the budget. Some discussion about budget balancing. Again, this is a guideline that has been long-standing, at least from my understanding, in terms of that we will use operating margin, and it is defined here, since what we call operating margin is not a traditional operating margin in other industries, and that our target range is 89 to 91%. But again, that's not that it has to be within that, but that is establishing what our target range.
Want to have target numbers within this policy document, or should they be developed separately?
They could be separate.
I think it's okay in the policy document. Those numbers have stayed consistent for,
I know it says target and so forth,
Yeah.
it can certainly vary, but
But
really
don't we,
caution of tying it down to target numbers when it's a broad-based policy.
Don't we
document.
effectively establish that when we do the budget, though?
Yeah, but when we're putting together the 5-year plan, that's the number we're looking at getting to, about 90%.
Jack, I think your point is a good one, but I think to the extent that we've come to this number separately, I don't have a particular, and I don't know that we're going to change it a lot. I don't have a problem with having it in here, which maybe forces us to reconsider it if we ever wanted to. We or some future council.
The fund balance percentage over the years has been a hotly debated topic, and the number has varied all over the place. And so that's an example of a target number that once you start putting it in a policy document, you got to keep going back and revising your policy.
But if we were going to adopt a budget that contained a number dramatically different than this, shouldn't that be a topic of conversation?
I was just commenting.
I guess
Either way.
the, I know I've seen spreadsheets and projections where the operating margin was less than 89 or above 91. Yeah, I think you probably recall it better than me. But, and I wouldn't want that number, if it's 88 or 92, to perceive that we have missed our, I don't know, target range, that we're not,
Yeah, I mean, you can see it's a
it's such a
citizen
close number.
complaint that you're violating your policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
agree.
jumping around a little, but yeah, that's why I intentionally put the next couple sentences in there to clarify that while this may be the target range, it will fluctuate. At times, it will not be within that range, but that we need to make sure to, as Doug said, that we discuss why is it and are we comfortable with that,
You were hedging your bet, that's okay. All right.
to hopefully leave it broad enough to where if we decide in the future that it should be 88 to 92%, we're not having to always revise a policy just for that. Yeah.
I'm all right.
Then a note about fund balance appropriation, that it should be used to balance the budget only if it's required to cover capital expenditures or other financing uses. Again, this is consistent with what we do. It's just formalizing that. Then there's an outline of the budget process. It starts with the portion that is actually determined by the statutes, what's required by the state statutes, versus then what we kind of do internally in some more,
Like this, you're defining it, yeah.
yeah. And
I'm sorry. This is, I think, the first time that you use the capitalized phrase budget officer. And just below that, it says budget officer, paren village manager. Is that one and the same, or are you the budget officer?
the village manager is the budget officer as defined by the statute.
That's statutory.
That's statutory, yes.
Just scroll back down a little. I want to see those 3 bullets again. No, the other
Oh,
one.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know, I guess I always thought that the departmental budget requests had to be in earlier than April 30th.
Our internal deadline is
Yeah.
earlier, but the
Oh, okay.
statutory deadline is April 30th.
Okay,
Yeah, so there are some
my
things in here where we follow a schedule that is ahead of what it states in these bullet points. The recommended annual budget, including the budget message, must be submitted to Village Council by June 1st. We're usually doing that at the first meeting in May.
right.
But so our internal deadlines are typically ahead of what's required by the statute, but at least here, it's, kind of clearly establishing that that's the latest those things can be done.
Okay.
And then this gets into some, just more, a discussion of our internal process. Nothing too specific. We get into those weeds, when it comes to the work that Doug and I do with the department heads and others in finance in actually developing the budget. This is almost a copy and paste out of the SOP document in terms of the discussion of our budget process. including our, review and analysis, the adoption, implementation and monitoring, so the process we go through, and if we need to amend the budget after it has been adopted.
I never knew the budget to actuals are daily. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, so we
Budget
have
to actual reports?
we have online budget to actual reports that are available
Daily.
internally to department heads and some other staff
That's good to
on a
know.
daily basis, yes. So they can always be checking before they submit a purchase order.
In theory.
I can be left off that distribution list.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not available to every employee, just on a need-to-know basis, pretty much.
Right.
The mid-year budget review, which is, I'm working on that now, and we'll come to you at the next meeting for approval.
Haven't you realistically done that quarterly anyway?
Yes, when we're doing the quarterly financial statements, I'm looking at that and seeing, based on where we're at so far, do we think we'll make the budget? This is a more formal process for the mid-year projection that is a required step, or it's required in what is submitted for the budget, based on the statutes that we have an estimate for this fiscal year. And so it's the process we go through to develop what estimated numbers are presented in the budget. And then our long-term financial planning, this is the 5-year forecast and CIP, the 5-year capital improvement plans. And again, I think this section really is nothing new, just taking the information that's in the SOP document and putting it into this format. I think in some cases, the SOP document goes into more detail. Being a policy document, I left some of the detail out, particularly anything related to what assumptions we use and things like that, since that can change from year to year. But overall, in terms of the process that we go through to develop it and what we're including, in terms of projections of revenues, operating expenditures, anticipated debt service, or however we're planning to fund capital. And then finally, just a note on how we are assessing the effectiveness and efficiency of services provided, so that we will have performance measures that will help us measure whether we're adhering to the budget and setting the accountability for who is ultimately responsible. So that is the...
By the way, did the legislature last year pass any statute that had an impact on our budget execution or budget policies or anything for the state? No. I didn't think so. I just wondered. Things they snuck in bills, you never know.
They're sneaky sometimes.
Okay.
All right, so any other questions or comments on the budget and financial planning? Right. Then I'll just make that, that one change that Mr. Taylor had noted, if that's okay with everyone. And then next we have the accounting and financial reporting policy. This one relates basically to then how we are accounting and reporting for the actuals. We have the budget and financial planning that's developing and adopting the budget, and then this policy has to do with how we account for and how our internal controls around the actuals, so as transactions are happening, and the reporting that goes along with that, primarily the audit report. For this one, because it does have a lot of more technical accounting terminology in it, I included definitions. It's like 3 pages of definitions, so I debated should they go at the end, but I put them at the beginning here, so we do have a lot of them are GASB definitions of items for terminology that's used throughout the policy.
Use the modified revenue recognition. Am I right in saying that the modified says that just because we issued property taxes to the X number of property owners in the village, we are not accruing that as revenue until it actually appears on the books from the county in this case? Is that correct?
Correct, that's an excellent example, yes. So the modified accrual is somewhere between accrual, full accrual basis, where you're recognizing a revenue as soon as you are entitled to have someone pay you, and for expenditures, as soon as you receive the good or service, you are obligated to pay someone. That's when you're recognizing revenues and expenditures. Modified is somewhere in between accrual and cash basis. Cash, you're recognizing it only when you either receive the cash or pay someone. It's somewhere in the middle, and the reason for that is because you know that you're not always going to get paid quickly. And taxes can be one of those things. Fortunately here, people pay their taxes 99.9% of the time, on time. And so we do receive a lot of that revenue, but in some cases, it could take years to collect that. And so those taxes that are not paid timely, we are not recognizing as revenue, because we're more focused on what resources do we have right now to pay things that are coming up in the near term.
But we don't, whatever the total of taxes issued is, we don't set that up as taxes receivable and then reduce that as taxes come in, because that now becomes cash.
Correct. So when we get the levy for the fiscal year, we are not recording that as a receivable and revenue, because we are only doing that as we are receiving it, as it's collected by the county.
How do you categorize the uncollected taxes, the less than 1%? What bucket are they in?
There is a receivable on the books, but we cannot recognize it as revenue. There's an offsetting
Okay.
unearned revenue account on the balance
It's
sheet.
a receivable.
So
just
we
like-
are keeping track of what is not received, but we don't put it on the books as revenue. It's as an unearned revenue, which is also on the balance
We
sheet.
don't categorize that as uncollectible or unlikely to be doubtful collections.
We do
don't
not
recognize-
for the taxes,
Interesting.
because the county is going to continue to pursue collections on them. Other receivables, we do that. Primarily the penalties, the fines and penalties that
And so the main
code
reason for this is
enforcement ones.
because we don't actually collect the taxes. They're collected by the county and with some delay then remitted to us.
Yeah, we get them every month, yep. Yep, so going through the different definitions, okay. Then just establishing, again, a lot of this policy is using, the sections that are already in the audit report. And there's several pages in the footnotes, the first footnote of the statement on our accounting policies. And so a lot of this comes from there. But just establishing that we adhere to generally accepted accounting principles as promulgated by the GASB, and also that we will ensure that we are complying with the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act and the LGC guidance. This then is stating in the two different types of statements that we have to issue, which measurement focus and basis of accounting we're using. Financial reporting, auditing, and transparency is establishing that we will have an audit done, and if we are required to have a federal single audit or a state single audit, we will also have those completed by the statutory deadline set by the LGC, which in the past has always been October 31st. For the FY25 audit, they're extending it to December 31st. I think that will be the case going forward, but my goal will still be to have it done by October 31st. There's a statement in here that the finance officer will prepare the quarterly financial statements and present them.
Quarterly reports, they go on our website?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, and so that is kind of addressed here, that will, in the spirit of transparency, information will be made available to the public, both in public meetings, the website, and other methods. There's a section here on internal controls, just kind of setting standards. And these are very kind of basic standards that any entity should have in terms of internal controls and accountability. That I am ultimately responsible for making sure that all of this is followed.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. Thank John, thank you for that little
All right.
that minor catch. Anybody have any other questions or comments? No? All right.
Thank you.
Hearing-
That'll come for us in a final form, and we'll just pass a resolution.
Yes, so I do have two other new policies that I've drafted, one for debt and one for donations. My plan was to bring those to a future work session, and then once I have all of the feedback,
The whole
bring all the
package at once.
policies as a package to be adopted
Okay,
at one time, if that is okay.
Are there standard North Carolina debt guidelines
Yes.
that we're adopting from? Yes, okay.
Yes, so the debt policy, I don't want to give away too much. Yes, so it complies with the North Carolina statutory requirements for debt, as well as,
That's fine. I just
kind
was
of-
curious. I figured they'd had something. I
yep,
just not
yeah, that's
familiar
the
with it.
primary driver that's behind it.
Thank you.
Yep,
Am I correct in my assumption that all the concerns for semantics of the therefore, whereas, opportunities, whatever is supposed to be done via email as we're correcting this and getting that back to you? Is that what we're looking at doing versus having another work session to address the exact verbiage and everything else?
In these, I don't think we need another work session.
Oh,
The one we
I
went through.
agree.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that what we're doing is that by email, if there's any specific concerns you
Oh, yeah.
have on the wording, address that from the council to Dana, so we can get that together.
Yeah.
We can
I
handle
don't
that by email versus having another work session meeting.
I don't
for
have
this.
anything else. I think what you said is that the debt and the other one, you're going to bring to us to go through, and we'll be fine. Then you're going to roll it into one package, and we'll adopt it.
yes,
Okay,
is that okay?
That's great with me, thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
all right,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. That leads us to item B, Downtown Parking Enforcement Plan. And I think I hear the footsteps of Doug Willardson.
That's actually Dana's footsteps, so.
Okay.
So, this is the age-old problem, solving parking in downtown. So here's our latest plan. So we looked at the license plate reader, and while it is kind of fancy and exciting, really we didn't think that it would be worth the cost of it. We'd still have to have a part-time employee running it, and between the times where they're running the routes to time check everything, it's kind of dead time, and so they'd just be sitting around and not having a whole lot to do. So we feel like we can hire a part-time employee, have them manually chalk the tires, or maybe there's another way we can eventually figure it out how to do it. Maybe it's taking pictures or something like that to get it done without spending a lot of money on the software system. So yes, our recommendation is to hire that. There is a downtown parking attendant job description that I shared with you. We want this to be a civilian employee that works with the police department. There will not be a sworn officer. And
Will they be uniformed?
they will not dress like a police officer, but they will be dressed so you will know that they are a parking attendant.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was getting at, yeah.
And a couple other things. So currently, we charge only the $5 for a parking ticket, and actually 90% of that has to go to the schools. So if we change the law under which we are issuing tickets, we're able to charge up to $50 a ticket, and if they're civil, then we don't have to share those penalty fees with the school department. So we'll actually be able to keep the full $50 when now we give all of
I did not realize that.
So there was an ordinance that was shared with this that, addresses that and would allow us to change the parking. I will pull up a map.
Let me just ask a couple of quick questions.
Yep.
Are we comfortable, we feel rather certain that the chalking, as referenced in tires, is perfectly kosher? Has our lawyer blessed that?
He has, yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, and, if something else, the Supreme Court decided to take that up, which I don't think it's worth their time, we could find another method to.
No, I understand. I'm just curious if that's what's going to be the mechanism
Yeah.
that we're okay. Okay.
So the yellow areas is what I am proposing to be 3-hour parking. And actually, we could have a discussion whether it should be 3 hours or 2 hours, but this is the timed parking locations. So any questions on that, thoughts?
I have no problem going to 2 hours in the yellow areas, throwing that out there.
I prefer the 3 hours so people aren't rushed if they're going to lunch and shop. But I just want to take a look at where we're parking here.
I would propose one addition to this. I have no problem with the yellow that you've outlined. But my highly unscientific survey of people I meet in at the Village or Deli for breakfast or what have you, I would extend it from roughly the front door of the Holly Inn back toward the downtown area, because I've found more than occasional people who say they don't park in the Holly Inn lot. They actually park out on the street out in front.
I mean, on Cherokee, on the south side
On
of
Cherokee Road, yes.
Okay.
But
And there may only, and there's going to be a limit because we can't impinge the library, the archives, but there might be 4 or 5 more spaces along there
There's
that
a lot
I
of
would have it
spaces
applied
between
to.
there, yeah.
yeah,
Yes. So this blue line here is actually 1-hour parking that's currently in place in front of the library.
okay.
And then we have quite a bit of parking from there to roughly here.
I'm fine with the suggestion of Councilman Taylor, as long as the parking for the library remains as it is.
No, we need, I don't think many people need to go for more than 3 hours to the library, but I would include a few, it's 5 or 6 more spaces. I don't think it's more than that.
It's basically,
Yeah, so are you talking directly in front of the Holly or on both sides of the street?
They're all striped parallel parking.
Yeah,
right?
yes.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, but you mean both sides of the Cherokee?
Yeah, there are only a couple on the
On-
Holly Inn side.
yeah,
Most
right,
of them are on
they're
the
right here.
side opposite, but
Yeah.
Are you saying take away the blue line and make that a yellow one? Because then
No.
you're taking it from 1 hour to 2.
blue line stays. A new yellow line starts to the left of the blue line.
Got it. I'll
From here
support that.
to here.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that as well. My concern is that we force all these people to park in the sand lot. I just want to make sure we have enough room in the sand lot to
Sure.
every employee
Right,
that works
yeah.
downtown. So that's why I did not put that in there, just so there were some extra spaces that weren't directly in front of retail.
I think that's correct, except Mr. Taylor's correct in that there's a lot of overnight parking, believe it or not, people staying at the Holly Inn.
Yeah.
And employees.
And of
that
course,
use
when
the
they come out
on-street
in the
parking.
morning to go play golf, they get in the shuttle to go to the golf course. They
but-
don't get in their car.
Our policy discusses between 9 and 4, not overnight.
Well, employees, day employees, they're.
Right, but I mean, if someone's
I-
staying
I'm,
at the Holly overnight, then they leave at 8 in the morning, it doesn't matter.
a couple of things. One is, I'm okay with the 3-hour. I think that's the right time frame. My biggest concern is that we're going to push this parking somewhere else. And I think you're right, Doug, is that we got to provide a space to them to be pushed to. And the sand lot may or may not accommodate all this additional parking. Hopefully it will. But I'm once again, I'll go on the record that I'm concerned that we're being a little short-sighted by not having a parking deck somewhere in the vision coming forward. And I just want to lay that on the table. That's a long-term thing.
Jack, I wouldn't mind having a discussion later on, but I think when you look at the overall math of this, currently we are not overwhelming the sand lot. So the total amount of cars that's there, if we're pushing them out of there and pushing them into the sand lot,
Well, hopefully, we are pushing them into the sandlot, but there's a little bit of parking down Magnolia,
Okay.
you know,
I got it.
down
That you-
Cherokee and so forth and so on. So more than likely, some of that will move into those neighborhoods.
I agree. It's pushing a balloon. So, you know, you push it in one side, it comes out the other. It's still the same volume, though, that we're looking at.
Right.
So the probability in there is that it's going to be pushing it into the sand lot. If it overwhelms, it'll go to other places. And we may have to tweak this,
Okay, yeah, no,
okay?
you're
But
right.
this is the first bite of the apple.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, I think, but we will have to keep an eye on it to see whether we're realistically
Correct.
accomplishing what we want to.
My point is, we're not increasing the volume of cars that are actually parking in the area. That's still we're managing there.
Correct.
And hopefully they're not all empty and right in front of the storefront.
Right.
And whenever we return to the capital budgeting, I think, Jack, you're right, we have to take up how could we increase the total number of spots as opposed to squeezing the balloon and forcing person X to go from A to B.
Two questions. The yellow stripes there in front of the Villager Deli, are we enforcing all those? What is the rule of the road there? Those
So
parking.
that's the plan, that we would enforce that.
Okay, so that whole, gotcha?
Yeah,
I'm fine
so,
with that.
to that point, some of those are on private property. I'm meeting with the owner later this week. In the past, he has been willing to allow us to enforce whatever we're doing in the rest of the village to do that there.
And I think the same is true with the limited number of spots out the front door of the theater building.
That's true, too, yeah.
Yeah. Now,
Have we talked at all to the resort about limited parking in front of the Holly?
I have not, because originally I was not planning on limiting that at all.
Right. If we're going to, and I'm not against it, I think we ought to at least give them a heads up on this thing.
yeah.
For
okay.
sure.
Good idea.
Heads up is good. Second question, I see on the screen you have the number 22 signs. Is that telling us something?
So those are the, I forget what we call it, dine.
Yes, wine, dine, and,
shop,
right.
Visit
Yes.
signs. So there are 22 of those signs at those approximate locations. So we need to put a no parking sign. Best practice is 30 to 50 feet. I spaced them out roughly 50 feet. So that would be 32 signs.
Okay.
They're covering a lot more area, so they will be more spread out than those other ones.
And you may need some on Cherokee there.
Yeah, we'll need to add
So then 3 signs or something.
3, yeah, and then another one on the Holly side, so
Okay.
maybe 4 or 5 more signs.
And the other signs will be removed, is that correct?
Yeah, we're just gonna relocate those and change the signage.
So we'll use the same style, just,
Yep.
okay. And have we decided on verbiage yet, or?
We do have a mock sign. I didn't include it.
Okay, well, we can talk about it again.
How much standard traffic verbiage about parking?
There is, and we can have the boring red and white 3-hour parking ones, but we had one that used our colors and
Good, I hope, give thought to that. I think the current ones, whether we like the message or not, actually just blend in with our community.
Well, you don't want it to blend in too much. I
Well,
mean,
you
it
want to
would be
blend in enough that nobody's,
yeah, it's the same font, format, style
Yeah,
as
that's
the
it.
play, dine, whatever those signs say.
good.
So I have a question. If someone is parked in a 3-hour space and stays there 8 hours, is that 1 ticket or 2 tickets? And secondly, will we enforce towing?
So, that's a good question. How aggressive do you want to be on this?
What are the hours of the 3-hour parking limit? What time to what time?
I think I had 9 to 4.
9 to 4.
Practically speaking, right now, it would most likely just be 1 ticket.
Towing, are we?
That's up to you as a council if you want us to be that aggressive.
I would recommend we once we finalize this and adopt it, assuming we'll put it in place on July 1, if we get whatever we end up with, to begin the new fiscal year, we take some time to see how it's working and then adjust accordingly, rather than try to decide now. Let's
Yeah.
see what type of parking behavior modification takes place.
Right, if we have a lot of scoff laws and we need to, boot some cars.
And
maybe-
now that I know that money's coming right into our coffer, this is
Yeah,
Other-
no, that is definitely not the plan.
not the plan, but it might be a byproduct.
And other communities have the luxury of being able to escalate fines for repeat offenders. We don't have that. It's not something we can do.
So it's possible, like, we will have, we'll be tracking which cars had violations, but in order to have the officer out there, not the officer, the attendant out there that, they're gonna have to look it up, or it might not be worth the effort. But that is also something we can, like, try for 6 months. Hey, how's this working?
Yeah.
Maybe we should think about this.
And we obviously will be developing our own little database anyway. It's every ticket that's written is going to have some standard information, and
Yep.
we'll know about it. Okay.
So this is weekdays only, is that correct? I guess I didn't read that. No.
Yep, I did put that in there, and I'm assuming that's what council wants.
Yes.
Yes.
So, one other thing that, so this was, for 20 years or so in the 90s, early 2000s, there was timed parking that was somewhat enforced. One, it didn't have a dedicated person. It was the police on their spare time would go down and do it. So I think having a dedicated person will definitely help, so people know it's actually happening. And it was only $5, and so it's not much of a deterrent. And the reason we stopped doing it is because we only got 90% of, we only got 10% of the $5, and we were spending much more money processing the tickets than we actually received. So that's one of the reasons why we did away with it. Another problem that they had back then was that people would park in one spot and then move 3 spots over.
Right.
And so we'll have to keep an eye on that. I think that a parking attendant who is out there often, they'll start recognizing whose car's whose and like what buildings they park next to. I think they'll be able to manage that. But I think council is on board with this, but make it your 3-hour parking within that zone. So the zone would be like Market Square, Chinkopin, and maybe the theater building area. And so,
Oh, boy, that'll be tricky. I mean, you got a real estate agent that's there in the morning, and then they go out on a call, and then they come back and they park. I mean, I don't want to go down.
and maybe this is one of the things, like, let's just try it,
Let's-
and then
Yeah,
let's wait and
see if
see.
it becomes an issue.
Let me take maybe a step back here. I mean, the goal of this, in theory, would be to end up writing no tickets. And the goal,
Right.
and so whatever we're spending, whether it's for a person or a piece of software, we're never going to justify this on a rate of return basis. So my first question is, what's sort of the difference you've outlined the cost of the more automated system, which I had one resident tell me Blowing Rock implemented. I don't know if they have the issue that we have of second and third floor offices, but he claimed it was a substantial success. They used technology, and if the car drove by and you've been there 3 hours, they didn't get out and put a ticket on the windshield. That got automatically mailed to you by the software, based on whoever the registered owner is. I'm questioning. I like the automated system better, but not at any cost. And I'm just wondering, what is the difference between a person and then the associated cost there, plus whatever else they might be able to do? If we don't enforce this pretty assiduously at the beginning, it will fail.
Well, that's what we're going to have a test.
So to answer your question, John, so a part-time employee, we'll say, is $16,000 a year for part-time, 20 hours a week at a reasonable rate. So them chalking tires is basically free for equipment, things like that. And it would be a $50,000 startup and $22,000 annually after that for the
Software.
software system. And
But I,
I think we get the same results for half the cost.
Okay?
I mean, it seems to me we're going from a system where there is literally no deterrent. And we are putting in some modest, sensible changes. We're placing a time period where this will be in effect, which is 9 to 4 on weekdays. We're now going to implement a fine, parking fine, of which was $5 to $50, of which we didn't collect the $5, any of it, basically, or a penny of it. And now we're going to collect all the $50. And we're putting in a 3-hour time limit, which gives, I think, shoppers and diners adequate time to do what they'd like to do. I think it's a reasonable approach. We can see how it works and assess things as to the next step.
Yeah,
And I'd rather in 6 months after we put this in, decide that that person we've hired, we need to go a different route, rather than decide the $50,000 software we bought with the license fee isn't working and we need to go a different route.
Yeah, that's true. We can always add the software later.
Yeah, software is always.
And I agree with you, Pat, fully on that. I think that other part of this, in most organizations, the best ideas come from the ground up. And what we're doing here is we're putting somebody on the ground. And so hopefully the ideas come there. We'll also have ideas coming from the shop owners and things like that as to what's happening. This is not the last time we're visiting this. We're going to be talking about this a whole lot more.
Undoubtedly.
Doug updated us on what went on in the 90s, so we know we can revisit this.
Hand in hand with this, do we intend to do anything more forceful with respect to delivery trucks during the time?
Question.
And enforcing the loading zone and what have you after, let's say, 9 o'clock in the morning or 9:30 in the morning?
I'm not sure we should put the delivery trucks in the parking thing here.
Say that again?
If we want to address, I'm not sure we should put the delivery truck stuff in the parking thing
but
for this. Maybe we should look at that separately.
But we have a loading zone on Magnolia.
Understand. I don't disagree with that. I'm just not sure we need in the same conversation, the same policy we're doing.
I agree with you there. I want to ask one question. Right now, if a delivery truck is spending, I'll call it more than whatever time our ordinance calls for, double parked on Chincoquin, can that truck be ticketed?
It can be, yes.
And can this
If it's
individual,
double parked there, it can be taken.
so this individual could ticket it, the person we hire?
For double parking, yes.
Okay. So we in addition, we're now going to have somebody there from 9 to 4 who, if we present if there's some delivery truck problems, they can take action.
Yeah,
And certainly at the loading zone part.
I think delivery trucks is a little bit difficult, but I think the parking attendant can work with the delivery drivers to find something that works, and maybe you can have them come early, or maybe there's a solution that, 2 guys sitting on the street can work out rather than us here.
I think, at least in my 3 years on the council, that this seems to be the most practical approach that we would put into motion. And then, like lots of things, we'll reassess it after 6 months and make adjustments as necessary. So I'm impressed with what you've offered.
It'd also be nice to have a representative downtown a lot of time, and we will get a lot of feedback from them, I'm sure.
Yes, we will. Okay.
So kind of next steps, I will bring a parking ordinance for you at a meeting very soon.
Okay.
And then we will also need to add a position into our compensation plan. So we will add that, and we will look to fill that. I don't know, if the fines go in place July 1st, hopefully we can get someone on board around May, and maybe they can write warnings until July 1st and, get this rolling. It'll also take some time to get all those signs moved.
Right. That's right.
Will this
Signage
person-
issues.
Will this person report into the police department?
Yes.
Okay. Doug, thank you for the, presenting those options that thorough way. Appreciate it. Oh, yeah. Work here. How do I do it? There it is. Okay, all right, we're on to item C. Council feedback on comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
Doug, this is you.
Yeah, so Village Council adopted a policy that we would look at the comp plan. I believe it's every 4 years and odd years. 2025 is the year to do that. And we have kind of condensed that time, trying to get it done quickly so that if there are any changes made to our comp plan, that it will be able to inform the PDO as Kimley Horn goes through their process. Sent out I guess you'd call it a survey to council. What were some of the issues that council felt we might want to address in this? So we'll go over that in a minute. But after this, this will go to P&Z. They will hold a public hearing. They will be able to provide input to council. And then council, before we adopt it, will also have to hold a public hearing. So I don't necessarily think that we need to spend a ton of time on this tonight. If we're relatively in agreement with these are the themes, then we can just direct planning and zoning, hey, this is what council is thinking. And then after we get feedback from them, we can do a more formal, not necessarily a red line, but this is what a change might actually look in the in the comp plan.
Does it go to planning and zoning before it goes to the focus group? Help me understand this part.
So the focus group is PDO update. So there is no focus group for the comp plan update.
All right, I got it.
Is the requirement to go to P and Z statutory?
It is. Pretty-
Even though, changing the comp plan does not necessarily change zoning, although it may provide an overarching structure through which zoning may.
Yeah. So I said it was. I'm 90% sure it is. I can double check. I do know that it has to have a public hearing. That is statutorily required. So the feedback I received, one, balancing growth and specifically conservation neighborhoods, should they or should they not be discussed in relation to the ETJ area in Western Pinehurst. The Western Connector that is mentioned in our comp plan, and I think we kind of all understand that this is probably not viable anymore, so that would be appropriate to remove. Reevaluating the small area plan for Highway 5 commercial area. So we have.
Hey, let's talk slightly about the
Yep.
Highway 5. What I was thinking about this area is that, number one, we put together the regulating plan and the blocks and the, what type of uses can go into those. We didn't necessarily align any of that with the parcels, such that, we have a block that says you can have different kinds of uses, but it spans multiple parcels owned by different entities. And I wonder whether that's realistic moving forward. So that's why, one of the reasons I say we should reassess, our plan to make sure that it's realistic relative to, today's reality as far as who owns what. The second is that there was a great deal of talk about the innovation hub and et cetera down there, which of course is now less in favor, I should say. And it's more appropriate possibly to either consider whether should we rebalance that plan more towards residential, or should it be small area businesses that support the golf industry, for example. So I think that's the conversation that should be had relative to this area, if that makes sense.
Item 3 you're discussing then, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that is an appropriate discussion, consideration as we amend the comp plan, how that should be addressed in there. And probably even more so as we update the PDO, that needs to be addressed.
It doesn't change the comp plan as much as it actually changes when they do the PDO update, the small area plan and the form-based codes and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Jack, I think, again, taking your point and maybe expanding it a little, there are a number of comments of expressed intent that I'm really not sure we as a council have any ability to actually
No, of course not.
execute on. Now, if Moore County EDP brought someone who wanted to go into that area and establish, and I'm making this up, a WeWork space for technology companies, I think we'd look favorably on that, right? And they may have to talk to multiple parcel owners to find out the right parcel with the right zoning. But I don't think we're going to drive that process.
No, I don't think we do, but, and I'm not saying the comp plan does that. I'm trying to separate the comp plan from the small area plans and the zoning plan and so forth and so on. Those are real things
Yes,
that people depend upon as to what they can actually develop in a particular area. The comp plan is more of a aspirational, we would like it to be X or Y or Z. So it isn't really necessary that the comp plan be very, very specific. And I didn't intend that, but I just think it should be something that the focus group should convey to the PDO rewrite committee, whoever that might be, that they should look at that very, very carefully to see whether or not that needs adjustment. It doesn't necessarily change the comp plan. It just, the only change in the comp plan is the wording about innovation hubs. It might better be expressed a different way, and I think I mentioned some suggested comments about that.
And then the last kind of theme that came out was compatible growth along Highway 211. So that's both on the Pinehurst side, which could be a rezoning or an overlay or something like that, and then also on the county side and Taylortown side, that either is some sort of cooperative, like, get together and this is what we'd like to see there and everyone agrees to it. I don't think expanding our ETJ is going to be a viable option, but maybe working closely with them is. So.
Yeah.
my only reason for raising that is the idea that when that was attempted last, it was perhaps not as artfully done as it might have been. We have, I don't think, any intention to annex. But people who live there, that area is a designated focus area for growth, according to the county commissioners. Now, how their land use plan will change, we don't know. But that whole band from, let's say, Vass to Seven Lakes, along our northern border, is an area of focus for population growth. And we might, properly done, we might get a different reaction this time because people might rather have us controlling the zoning than the county. Maybe not, I don't know. I don't think it's an idea that should be totally discarded. It doesn't have to be a focus of this effort. But
I think as we look at these 4 points that you've given us, it seems to me that the first two, there may be a consensus here that we should sort of remove them from the assignment we're giving to folks on the comp plan. The Western Connector is just, it's never even been in a STIP, and I think if we get sidetracked on that, it's not the right thing for us to spend our time on, and so I would agree with the recommendation to remove the reference. On the issue of the conservation neighborhoods and the particularly within our ETJ, I've become a skeptic on those because I think it's almost an oxymoron when it's actually explained to you as to what they're doing with this neighborhood. And so if I do want to balance conservation and growth, I just think that approach of the conservation neighborhood doesn't really balance it. It's sort of the thumb is on the scale by some
Doesn't
part.
change the density.
Okay,
That's the
that's
bottom
even
line.
the bottom line.
Okay.
Thank you.
Doesn't change the density.
Now, so I too would not want to have them spend much time on that other than a statement of principle on balancing conservation and growth is a good thing. It's aspirational. We want to balance those things. But when we get into the weeds on this neighborhood is what we think is, this phrase of a neighborhood is what we think should be okay, we're going to get ourselves in trouble. On the reevaluating the small area plan for Highway 5, I do think, I'm always defer to Jack often on this, is that that's a little more PDO-centric
Yes,
than it is comp plan.
Very much
But I think the comp plan can set a little bit of a tone. And so I would hope that the folks who are doing this will just factor that in. Because we've traveled from the hub innovation to no hub innovation to, so we're confusing our residents. And, but what we need to keep in mind as we look in the newspaper every day is that Highway 5 is a beehive of activity with the road clearing. That's not all in Pinehurst, little of it, but there's the road clearings, there's the new neighborhoods, there's the new, that are being developed there, there's the, that very state-of-the-art waste, solid waste disposal area. There's Pinehurst number 10 and probably Pinehurst number 11. So that is going to be one busy area, and we really need to figure out how we opine on that. But I consider that very important. On the last item of compatible growth along Highway 211, and somebody expressed it a little earlier, it might have been Dr. Morgan. This is always a real concern of our residents that back into that. In essence, it's a Pinewild neighborhood, and they've always been very concerned about what's outside that gate. And I think the village has done a good job in trying to protect their area from just runaway development. But I do believe it would be wise for us to engage Taylortown to begin with, so that we end up speaking the same language going forward, and that we look at the issue that, Jack, you've mentioned in the past of the a potential overlay along that, so that, again, we just ensure a little more certainty for the residents out there on Linden and Pinewild and along our Chicken Plant Road area, because people move there for a reason. So those are just my
Yeah,
general
no, I agree.
thoughts.
I like the way number 4 is worded, particularly because it gets to really why that is a focus area 5 anyway, and it was included in the comprehensive plan because it needed some focus, and it has been, unfortunately, kind of set aside while we did the Village Place and we did the, Pinehurst South and so forth. That focus area has been not, the attention has not been paid to that, which we thought we were going to get out of the comprehensive plan. In other words, either in rezoning and or extending the ETJ, which is, in my opinion, a little unpractical now, or creating a overlay district. When we redo the PO, creating an overlay district, it doesn't, and then we can apply that somewhere. So this is important that be worded similarly. I like the way it's worded right now.
Glad you do, because I wrote it.
And
I would say that, similar to what we were saying about number 3, number 4 is probably more PDO update centric than
It is
comp
very
plan
much so.
centric. Yeah.
It's a directive to actually get to work on creating a district, which we don't have it applied right now, but we could apply it in the future.
So all we're really saying in 3 and 4 is, yeah, we want the PDO to focus on those areas.
okay.
Well, Matt, I hope you were taking notes, because this is, I totally agree with everything Patrick said, bar none.
Let me write that down.
Unbelievable. Hold on, let me get
Take
this.
off 1 and 2, let's go with 3 and 4.
Let me get a photo.
I'm not sitting closer to you, though, just letting you know.
I'm inclined to move to adjourn on that. You'd only go downhill from there.
So, Doug, the action items out of the discussion we've had is, what do you see them as?
So we'll give this feedback to the Planning and Zoning Board, and so they're aware of it. They'll hold their own public hearing. They'll make some recommendations to council on, potential amendments to the comp plan. We'll also just provide this as an FYI to Kimley Horn as they start looking at the PDO, just so they're aware of kind of where we're leaning as far as the comp plan goes.
And as far as discussion with Taylortown at all, do we wait, or do we start chatting with them, or what do you think?
I don't think it hurts to start talking with people
Okay.
whatever, so.
I think that opens up another ball there, just, and I think the communication in general will be healthy,
Yeah, I do too.
other things too.
I can look at and see what it's zoned now in both the Taylortown areas and the county areas, and be like, okay, well, what would we actually want it to be zoned differently? And then
That,
we can,
you know, that would be a very interesting map to see for sure. Yeah, if you get that together. That's a, okay. I just want to make a note on that. Okay. Um, Other, any other feedback, or do you want to know anything else from us about this? You all right?
I just want to make sure those are the appropriate themes, and I think we're good.
Okay. And on, related, you know, one of the things that's, just skipping a little bit to the PDO for a minute, because it's easy to get these things mixed and mangled up together for a little bit for ourselves, but certainly for residents who will say, I thought you were doing that. I thought you were doing that. You know, we're going to be spending some good money on that, and we probably, there's some residents' expectations of what that might evolve into. There certainly is going to be a healthy amount of public, I'll call it input, because I think there are folks that are going to be involved. So I think it behooves us to make sure, and probably a lot of this falls on you, Doug, and the staff, to make sure all these trains are somehow running on time, because they're getting on the track at the same time, basically. Okay, and they are both dealing with topics that are 5+ years old. They just haven't been looked at a lot, and they're up against or in competition with other communities nearby that are updating their own UDOs, and they're now running into the tinkering, shall we say, of the legislatures. So this is going to take some doing. I'm sure we can do it, but I think we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I agree. The comp plan update will be on a faster track than the PDO update, so.
Which it should be.
It's a lot easier too. We don't have to get too far down into the weeds either, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, we just say every time, like, oh, the PDO update will take care of that.
That's
you know?
right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more generalized statements
Yes.
is what I meant.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any other thing they want to mention or comment on? Doug, is there anything you want to hear from us anymore?
I think I'm good.
Okay. I'll entertain a closing
I
statement.
move to adjourn the working session.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We're out of the work. Do we need? No. Wait a minute. Do we need to adjourn the regular session?
No, we did that.
We're done.
We're done.
Okay. Thank you and good night. All right. That was very helpful. Those are two, you know, both the parking discussion